The morning sun filtered through the blinds of the small waiting room as Rita nervously thumbed through an outdated magazine, not really reading any of the words. Her heart was racing. This was supposed to be a routine checkup, nothing more. The past few months had been a blur of grief and loneliness after losing her husband Dev in that terrible accident on his way home from work. Some days, she still reached for her phone to text him about her day, only to remember he wasn't there anymore. "Mrs. Kumar," the nurse called, her gentle voice breaking through Rita's thoughts. Walking into the examination room, Rita noticed how everything felt different today. Maybe it was the way the nurse looked at her with an extra hint of softness in her eyes, or maybe it was just her imagination running wild. Dr. Patel, her trusted obstetrician of 5 years, entered the room with an ultrasound chart in her hands. There was something in her expression, a mix of excitement and concern that made Rita's stomach do a little flip. "Rita, I need you to take a deep breath for what I'm about to tell you," Dr. Patel said, pulling her chair closer. "Remember how you joked last time about feeling extra tired and showing so early?" She turned the monitor toward Rita and pointed to the screen. "Well, there's a reason for that. You're not just having a baby. You're having 3. The world seemed to stop spinning for a moment. Rita's hands gripped the edge of the examination table, her knuckles turning white. 3, she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But how will I? I'm alone." The tears she'd been holding back for months finally spilled over. Dr. Patel reached out and squeezed her hand. "Look at the screen, Rita. Look at those 3 little heartbeats flickering, each one strong and steady, just like their mother." Rita stared at the screen through blurry eyes, watching the tiny pulsing lights. 3 little lives were growing inside her, 3 pieces of Dev that she would get to keep forever. The thought both terrified and amazed her. The drive home felt surreal. Rita pulled into her apartment complex parking lot and just sat there, one hand on her slightly swollen belly. Her tiny one-bedroom apartment suddenly seemed impossibly small. Her job as a graphic designer, which she loved so much, now felt like a mountain to climb. How would she manage 3 babies all by herself? She called her best friend Priya, her hands shaking as she dialed the number. "Hey, are you sitting down?" she asked when Priya picked up. The squeal of excitement that came through the phone made Rita laugh for the first time in what felt like forever. That evening, Rita sat on her balcony, watching the sunset. She pulled out the ultrasound pictures, tracing the outline of each tiny baby with her finger. "Oh, Dev," she whispered to the evening air, "you always did like to surprise me." She could almost hear his laugh, could almost see the joy that would have lit up his face at this news. Her hand found its way to the small box on the side table, the one containing Dev's wedding ring that the hospital had returned to her. She opened it, letting the last rays of sunlight catch the golden band. "I don't know how I'm going to do this," she admitted to the quiet evening, "but I promise you I will. We will figure this out together somehow." As night fell, Rita began making lists. Things she would need, changes to make, people to talk to. Her small notepad quickly filled with her hurried handwriting. Between the lines of practical planning, hope began to bloom. Yes, this was terrifying. Yes, this was not how she imagined starting a family. But somewhere in the midst of her fear, there was a tiny spark of excitement, a flicker of joy that felt both foreign and familiar. She placed her hand on her belly again, feeling the slight swell that now held so much more meaning. "All right, little ones," she whispered, "your mom might be scared, but she's also stronger than she knows. We're going to be quite the team, the 4 of us." As Rita's belly grew, so did her worries. By her 5th month, walking became more like waddling, and climbing the stairs to her second-floor apartment felt like scaling Mount Everest. Her normally organized desk at home, where she worked on freelance design projects, was now cluttered with baby books, pregnancy journals, and an ever-growing collection of ultrasound pictures. "Take it easy," Dr. Patel would say at every appointment. But taking it easy wasn't in Rita's nature. Each morning, she'd wake up early, determined to prepare for the babies while she still could. Her living room slowly transformed into what looked like a baby supply store had exploded. 3 of everything lined up against the walls. One particularly challenging morning, while trying to reach for her dropped phone, Rita felt a sharp twinge in her back. The pain shot through her like lightning, bringing tears to her eyes. Her phone lay there, just out of reach, mocking her newfound limitations. That's when her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, happened to walk by her open door. "I thought I heard someone in distress," Mrs. Chen said, shuffling into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. Her kind eyes took in Rita's situation immediately. "Ah, the joys of carrying 3 little ones. My sister had twins. Nearly drove her crazy, but now they're the light of her life." From that day forward, Mrs. Chen became Rita's unofficial guardian angel. She'd appear with homemade soup, claiming she'd made too much. She'd help Rita sort through the mountain of baby clothes donated by well-meaning friends, sharing stories of her own motherhood journey that made Rita laugh despite her fears. The doctor's appointments became more frequent, each one bringing a mix of joy and anxiety. "Your blood pressure is a bit high," Dr. Patel noted during one visit, her forehead creasing with concern. "And baby C seems smaller than the others." She prescribed bed rest, words that felt like a prison sentence to Rita's active mind. Forced to slow down, Rita found herself talking to the babies more. She'd play Dev's favorite songs, telling them stories about their father. How he always burnt toast but made the best chai. How his laugh could fill a room. How he would have painted their nursery himself, probably getting more paint on himself than the walls. Her small design business had to take a backseat, but some clients stuck by her. She remembered crying when Mrs. Rodriguez, her longest-standing client, sent her a care package with 3 identical onesies that read, "Mommy's Little Designer." The support touched her heart, but the reality of supporting 4 people on her dwindling savings kept her awake at night. One evening, while scrolling through her phone, Rita found herself looking at old photos of Dev. There he was, making funny faces at their friend's baby shower, so natural with children. "You'd know exactly what to do," she whispered, rubbing her growing belly. Just then, she felt 3 distinct movements, as if the babies were responding to her voice. For the first time in weeks, she smiled through her tears. The nursery preparation became a community effort. Priya organized a painting party, though Rita was strictly forbidden from helping. She watched from her designated rest spot as friends transformed the spare room, with soft yellow walls and cloud decorations. Someone had found Dev's old guitar at the back of the closet, and they hung it on the wall, a piece of him watching over their children. Each night, Rita would sit in the rocking chair Mrs. Chen had insisted on gifting her, feeling the babies move. Sometimes, they'd have dance parties at 3 a.m. Other times, they'd play what felt like soccer with her ribs. "You 3 are already quite the handful," she'd say, imagining their personalities. Would they be artists like her? Would they have Dev's easy smile? His love for terrible puns? As her body changed and the challenges mounted, Rita discovered a strength she never knew she had. Yes, her back ached constantly. Yes, she had to plan bathroom breaks like military operations. And yes, sometimes she felt overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of what lay ahead. But with each kick, each heartbeat she heard during checkups, each small victory, she felt more ready to face whatever came next. After all, she wasn't just Rita anymore. She was becoming a mother of 3, and that required a special kind of courage. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday. Rita had been dozing in her recliner, unable to find comfort in her bed, when the cramping started. Different from the usual discomfort, these pains meant business. Her hands trembled as she dialed Priya's number, their midnight emergency plan finally putting into action. "It's time," was all she managed to say. The hospital bag, packed weeks ago, waited by the door like a faithful sentinel. Within minutes, Priya's car lights flooded Rita's living room window. Mrs. Chen appeared as if by magic, ready to lock up the apartment and follow them to the hospital in her son's car. The hospital corridors felt endless as Rita wheeled through them. 32 weeks, she heard Dr. Patel saying to the medical team. Triplets. We need NICU on standby. The words floated around her like butterflies, beautiful but just out of reach. Through the haze of medications and mounting pain, Rita kept one hand pressed against her belly. Stay strong, little ones, she whispered. We're almost there. The operating room lights were harsh and bright. Rita couldn't stop shaking, partly from medication, partly from fear. A kind-faced nurse held her hand while they administered the spinal block. Tell me about your babies, the nurse asked, trying to distract her. Rita found herself talking about the little personalities she'd come to know. How baby A was always the first to respond to music. How baby B seemed to have hiccups constantly. How baby C was the night owl. Okay, Rita, you're going to feel some pressure. Dr. Patel's voice came from behind the blue curtain. Pressure was an understatement. It felt like someone was rearranging her insides. Then, at 3:52 a.m., a cry pierced the air, tiny but fierce. Baby A is here, a beautiful girl. Tears streamed down Rita's face as she heard that first cry. 1 minute later, another cry joined in. Baby B, another girl. But baby C, their little boy, came out silent. Rita's heart stopped for a moment until a small, indignant wail finally broke through. He's giving us a run for our money, Dr. Patel chuckled. But he's perfect. They were whisked away to the NICU before Rita could really see them. Each baby weighed less than a bag of sugar, the girls at 2 pounds 14 ounces and 2 pounds 12 ounces, their brother the smallest at 2 pounds 9 ounces. In her recovery room, Rita could only look at the pictures Priya had managed to snap on her phone. 3 tiny beings, covered in wires and tubes, but undeniably perfect. The first time she was wheeled into the NICU, 12 hours after delivery, Rita felt overwhelmed by the beeping machines and medical terminology. But then she saw them, 3 incubators in a row, each containing a miracle. The nurses helped her understand the monitors, teaching her what each number meant. They showed her how to reach through the small openings to touch her babies, how to speak softly to them. They know your voice, the NICU nurse assured her. Talk to them, sing to them. They've been listening to you for months. So Rita did. She split her time between the 3 incubators, telling them stories about their father, about their family, about all the adventures they would have together. She learned each baby's quirks, how the firstborn would grasp her finger tight, how the middle girl would wiggle at the sound of her voice, how the little boy would calm instantly when she hummed Dev's favorite lullaby. Pumping breast milk became her new full-time job. Every 3 hours, like clockwork, she'd hook herself up to the machine, determined to give her tiny warriors the best chance. The nurses joked that she was their star milk producer, her labeled bottles filling the NICU fridge. Each drop felt like liquid gold, a tangible way she could help her babies grow stronger. Days blended into nights in the fluorescent-lit NICU world. Rita learned medical terms she never thought she'd need to know, celebrated every gram gained, and held her breath during each test and assessment. The nurses became family, teaching her how to change diapers smaller than her palm, how to take temperatures on babies that seemed too fragile to touch, how to read their cues and needs. Through it all, she kept Deb's wedding ring on a chain around her neck. Sometimes, during the quiet night hours in the NICU, she'd hold it while watching their children sleep in their incubators. Look what we made, she'd whisper to him. 3 perfect little fighters, just like their dad. And somewhere between the beeping monitors and the hushed conversations, between the fear and the hope, Rita found herself becoming not just a mother, but a warrior in her own right. After 2 months of living between hope and fear in the NICU, the day Rita had dreamed of finally arrived. They're ready to go home, Dr. Patil announced during morning rounds. The words felt surreal, exciting and terrifying all at once. The nurses helped her pack up their belongings, each item carrying 2 months' worth of memories. Their first onesies, the tiny hand-knitted hats from Mrs. Chen, and countless Polaroid pictures documenting every milestone. The car ride home was possibly the slowest journey of Rita's life. Priya drove at a snail's pace while Rita sat in the back, squeezed between 3 car seats, her hand resting on each baby in turn, making sure they were still breathing. The 10-minute drive took nearly half an hour, but no one complained. Walking into her apartment felt like entering a new world. The space that once seemed too small now felt enormous and frighteningly empty without the constant presence of medical staff. The babies, now weighing a much healthier 5 pounds each, looked impossibly tiny in their cribs. That first night home was a blur of feeding schedules, diaper changes, and very little sleep. Rita had created a color-coding system: purple for the firstborn, green for the middle girl, and blue for their little brother. Everything from bottles to pacifiers was marked accordingly, a desperate attempt to maintain order in the chaos. Around 3 a.m., with all 3 babies somehow crying at once, Rita found herself sitting on the nursery floor, tears streaming down her face. The weight of being solely responsible for 3 tiny lives hit her full force. That's when she heard a gentle knock at her door. Mrs. Chen stood there in her nightgown, holding a thermos of hot tea. "I thought you might need this," she said, settling down next to Rita. The first night is always the hardest. She helped Rita organize the feeding schedule, showing her tricks she learned from her sister's twin experience. "One day, you'll look back at this night and laugh," she promised, though Rita found it hard to believe in the moment. Days became a carefully choreographed dance of bottles, diapers, and 2-hour sleep intervals. Rita learned to feed 2 babies at once, propping them up with specially designed pillows while the third waited their turn. She mastered the art of changing diapers in record time and could tell which baby was crying just by the sound. The triplet stroller, her biggest investment, became both her salvation and her nemesis. Getting all 3 babies into it was like solving a complex puzzle, but once they were secured, she could finally leave the apartment. Her first solo grocery trip became an adventure. People would stop and stare, some offering help, others just wanting to peek at the babies. Her living room transformed into a baby care command center. The coffee table disappeared under a mountain of diapers. The couch became a feeding station, lined with burp cloths and spare onesies. Her design tablet, once her primary tool for work, now served as a makeshift white noise machine. Each baby's personality began to shine through. The firstborn was the observer, taking everything in with wide eyes. The middle girl was the vocal one, making her needs known loud and clear. Their little brother was the cuddlebug, always happiest when being held. Rita found herself talking to Dev about their quirks, imagining his reactions to each new development. Sleep deprivation became her constant companion, leading to amusing incidents like putting her foam in the fridge and the milk in her bedroom. One morning, she found herself answering the door to the grocery delivery person while wearing 2 different shoes. But there were beautiful moments too, like when all 3 babies were finally asleep, their tiny chests rising and falling in sync, or when the first real smile appeared. Not just one, but 3 different smiles, each melting her heart in its own way. During these precious moments, Rita would take out her phone and record quick video diaries, capturing the chaos and joy of their daily life. The support system she built proved invaluable. Priya would come over with takeout and insist on Rita taking a proper shower. Mrs. Chen kept her freezer stocked with homemade meals. Even her local parenting group for multiples reached out, offering hand-me-down clothes and much-needed advice. Every evening, as the sun set and the babies had their last feed of the day, Rita would sit in the rocking chair, looking at Dev's guitar on the wall. "We're doing it," she'd whisper, both to him and to herself. "It's messy and exhausting, and sometimes I feel like I'm failing, but we're doing it." And in those quiet moments, watching her 3 miracles drift off to sleep, she knew that despite the challenges, they were exactly where they were meant to be. The 6-month milestone crept up like a quiet sunrise. Rita sat at her kitchen table one morning, sipping lukewarm coffee while updating her color-coded charts when she realized something had changed. The chaos wasn't gone. Far from it. But somehow, she'd learned to dance with it. Her phone buzzed with notifications from her newly created blog. 3 times the love. What had started as late-night rambles during feeding sessions had grown into a small community. Other parents of multiples reached out, sharing their own stories, offering tips, and finding comfort in knowing they weren't alone. Rita's honest posts about dropping a bottle of pumped milk and crying over it, or accidentally putting a diaper on backwards at 3 a.m., resonated with parents worldwide. The babies were developing their own routines. The eldest had mastered rolling over first, always watching her siblings with curious eyes. The middle one babbled constantly, carrying on full conversations in her own language. The youngest, though still the smallest, had developed an infectious giggle that could light up the entire room. One particularly memorable morning, Rita attempted her first solo outing to the local park. Loading 3 babies into the stroller was still a workout, but she'd developed a system. "Right, my little circus," she announced. "Today we're going on an adventure." The walk that used to take 10 minutes now took 30, but she didn't mind. Each stop to pick up a dropped toy or adjust a sunshade was just part of their new normal. At the park, an elderly couple stopped to admire the babies. 3 at once. The woman gasped. "You must have your hands full." Rita smiled, used to these comments now. "Full hands, full heart," she replied, surprising herself with how naturally the words came. It hadn't always felt that way, but now she couldn't imagine life any different. Back home, Rita had transformed their living space into an efficient baby command center. The play area featured 3 bouncy seats arranged in a semicircle, which she called the Triangle of Joy. She'd mastered the art of entertaining 3 babies simultaneously, singing songs with different colored puppets, each baby following their color with surprising focus. Her work-from-home routine had evolved too. During the precious minutes when all 3 napped, a rare miracle, she'd power through graphic design projects. Her clients had become surprisingly understanding, especially after she started incorporating baby-related themes into her designs. One particularly successful logo for a children's brand had been inspired by her middle child's attempt to eat a crayon. The triplets' different personalities became more pronounced each day. The eldest was methodical, studying her toys before playing with them. The middle one threw herself into everything with gusto, usually ending up with food in her hair during mealtimes. The little boy remained the quiet observer, but his smile could melt even the toughest day away. Mrs. Chen still appeared like a guardian angel, now teaching Rita to make simple baby food purees. "My sister always said, 3 spoonfuls make a meal, 3 meals make a day, and before you know it, they're running around asking for cookies," she'd say, watching Rita juggle feeding time with surprising grace. One evening, while attempting to film the babies for her blog, Rita caught a moment that made her heart stop. All 3 babies were lying on their playmat, holding hands in a perfect circle. She grabbed her phone just in time to capture it, tears streaming down her face. Later that night, she wrote in her blog, "Sometimes the perfect moments come wrapped in imperfect packages. Today, in between spit-ups and diaper blowouts, my babies reminded me that love multiplies, it doesn't divide." The challenges were still there, the mountain of laundry that never seemed to shrink, the logistics of bath time that resembled a military operation, the constant puzzle of which baby needed what and when. But Rita had found her rhythm. She'd learned to celebrate small victories, all 3 babies napping at once, successfully cooking dinner with one hand, or managing to drink a whole cup of coffee while it was still hot. On their half-birthday, Rita sat in the rocking chair, watching her 3 miracles sleep peacefully in their cribs. She touched Dev's wedding ring, still hanging around her neck. "You should see them," she whispered. "They're amazing. And somehow, someway, we're all going to be okay." And for the first time since becoming a mother of 3, she truly believed it. The first birthday preparation turned Rita's apartment into a whirlwind of activity. 3 tiny party hats sat on the kitchen counter, each color-coded to match their system: purple, green, and blue. She still couldn't believe an entire year had passed since those terrifying yet magical moments in the NICU. Early that morning, while preparing for the small celebration they'd planned, Rita noticed something different about her eldest. Instead of her usual army crawl, she pulled herself up against the coffee table and stood wobbly-legged, beaming with pride. Rita fumbled for her phone, hands shaking with excitement, barely managing to capture the moment before her little one plopped back down. The middle child, not to be outdone, chose that same morning to perfectly pronounce mama, not her usual babbling, but clear as day. She repeated it like a song, pointing at Rita with sticky fingers from her breakfast banana. The youngest, watching his sisters from his playmat, clapped his tiny hands in approval, though his own developmental journey was taking a slightly different path. During their last pediatrician visit, Dr. Singh had noticed the little boy wasn't quite meeting all his milestones. "He's taking his time," she explained gently, which isn't uncommon for multiples, especially those born early. Rita had nodded, trying to keep her voice steady as they discussed early intervention and physical therapy. That night, she held him a little longer, whispering promises that they'd face whatever came their way together. The birthday party was small but perfect. Mrs. Chen outdid herself with 3 small, healthy smash cakes. Each one dyed naturally with different fruits. Priya hung streamers while Rita dressed the babies in matching outfits, complete with iron-on numbers she'd designed herself. Her blog followers had sent virtual wishes, some even sharing their own triplet first birthday stories. The cake smashing was exactly the beautiful disaster Rita had anticipated. The eldest approached her cake with scientific curiosity, poking it carefully before diving in. The middle one turned herself into a purple frosting tornado, managing to get cake in her ears somehow. The youngest simply sat and giggled at his sister's antics, preferring to smoosh the cake between his fingers rather than eat it. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and the babies were asleep, Rita sat surrounded by wrapping paper and memories. She opened her laptop to update her blog, which had become her diary of sorts. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she thought about the past year. She wrote about the challenges, the 3 consecutive ear infections that had everyone up for weeks, the time she'd accidentally locked herself out while getting the mail, thank goodness for Mrs. Chen's spare key, and the constant worry about their development. But she also wrote about the joy. The first time all 3 laughed together at her silly dance moves, the way they'd hold hands in their cribs through the slats, and how the eldest would pat her brother's back when he was fussy. The physical therapy sessions for the youngest had become part of their routine. Twice a week, they'd visit Ms. Paula, who turned exercises into games that all 3 babies could enjoy. Rita marveled at how her son's determination matched his father's, that same focused expression Dev used to get when tackling a difficult problem. Their tiny apartment had evolved with them. The living room now featured a giant playpen she called the arena, where all 3 could safely explore while she worked nearby. She'd become an expert at typing with one hand while holding a bottle with the other, and her graphic design clients had grown to love the occasional baby babble during video calls. That night, after posting her blog update, Rita did something she'd been putting off. She opened the box of Dev's things she'd stored away when it hurt too much to look at them. Inside, she found the small video camera he'd always carried around, documenting everything. With trembling hands, she charged it and pressed play. There he was, filming their empty spare room, talking excitedly about turning it into a nursery someday. His voice, so full of hope and dreams, filled the quiet apartment. "We'll need a rocking chair right here," he was saying, "and maybe some stars on the ceiling." Rita glanced at the nursery now, with its 3 cribs and the glow-in-the-dark stars she'd put up months ago, exactly where he would have wanted them. She touched the wedding ring around her neck and smiled through her tears. "Happy birthday, little ones," she whispered, both to her sleeping babies and to the dreams she and Dev had shared. "We made it through year 1, and somehow, we're all exactly where we're supposed to be. Life has a funny way of teaching you lessons when you least expect them. For Rita, this revelation came one rainy Tuesday morning when all three toddlers decided to paint the walls with their breakfast yogurt. Instead of crying, which she might have done 6 months ago, she found herself laughing and grabbing her phone to capture the moment for her blog. The online community she'd built had grown beyond her wildest dreams. What started as late-night ramblings had evolved into a lifeline for parents of multiples worldwide. Her post about surviving the terrible twos with triplets had gone viral, catching the attention of a local parenting magazine. They wanted to feature her story. "I'm not an expert," Rita protested during the phone interview. The journalist chuckled. "You're raising 3 two-year-olds alone and still managing to smile. That makes you an expert in my book." The resulting article, 3 Times the Love, One Mother's Journey, brought an unexpected wave of support and new connections. Through her growing network, Rita discovered a local multiple birth association. Their first meeting was chaos in the best possible way. A room full of parents who understood exactly what it meant to change 3 diapers in 5 minutes or cook dinner with a baby on each hip. Her eldest immediately gravitated toward the craft table, while the middle child turned the playroom into her personal stage. The youngest, still working with his physical therapist, found a friend in another little boy who also loved nothing more than quiet puzzle time. Miss Paula, their physical therapist, had become more than just a medical professional. She celebrated every milestone with them. The first time the youngest took independent steps, when he finally climbed the playground stairs by himself, and most recently, when he started running, albeit a bit wobbly, after his sisters. "He's got the heart of a lion," Miss Paula would say, high-fiving him after each session. The apartment that once felt too small now seemed to be bursting with life and love. Rita had transformed the living room into an educational play space, with learning stations that catered to each child's interests. The eldest had a mini art corner with chunky crayons and paper. The middle one had a performance area complete with toy microphone, and the youngest had his building blocks and puzzles. Mrs. Chen continued to be their guardian angel, now teaching the triplets to make dumplings with Play-Doh while sharing stories about their Chinese heritage. "Your father would be so proud," she told Rita one afternoon, watching the children attempt to fold their colorful dough. "He'd love seeing how you've kept his culture alive in them." The blog had unexpectedly turned into a small business opportunity. Other parents began asking Rita to share her organizational systems, color-coding charts, and meal planning strategies. She started creating downloadable planners specifically designed for parents of multiples, incorporating her graphic design skills with her hard-earned parenting wisdom. One Saturday morning, while attempting to organize a playdate with another triplet family from their support group, Rita had an idea. She created a social media group called Multiple Marvels, the local network for families with multiples to connect, share resources, and arrange meetups. What started with 5 families quickly grew to 50. The children's personalities continued to bloom. The eldest had become the household problem solver, figuring out how to reach snacks by creating steps with their toys. The middle child never met a stranger, chatting up everyone at the grocery store with her growing vocabulary. The youngest, though still quieter than his sisters, had developed a mischievous streak that kept Rita on her toes. During one of their regular park visits, Rita watched her 3 little ones navigate the playground. The eldest carefully calculated each move before climbing. The middle one belted out songs from the top of the slide, and the youngest methodically made his way up the steps he'd once struggled with. A fellow mom commented on how well-behaved they were. Rita smiled, remembering the yogurt-painted walls from just that morning. "They have their moments," she said, "but they're teaching me more than I'm teaching them." That evening, updating her blog while the kids slept, Rita reflected on how far they'd come. The support group she'd created was planning their first annual multiple families picnic. Her planning templates were helping other parents find their rhythm. Most importantly, Her little tribe of 4 had found their place in a community that understood and celebrated their journey. The sound of tiny feet pattering across the wooden floor had become Rita's favorite morning alarm. Now, at 2 years old, her trio had mastered the art of escaping their toddler beds, usually working together in what she fondly called their great escape plans. The eldest would figure out the best time to climb out, the middle one would create a distraction with her singing, and the youngest would giggle as they all made their way to Mama's room. Life had taken an unexpected turn when Rita's blog caught the attention of a mobile app developer. "Your organization systems for managing triplets are incredible," the email read. "Would you be interested in turning them into an app?" Rita stared at the message for a long time, her coffee growing cold beside her laptop. The possibility of combining her graphic design skills with her hard-earned parenting wisdom seemed almost too good to be true. Working from home with 3 active toddlers required Olympic-level multitasking. Rita set up her workspace in the corner of the living room, surrounded by child-safe barriers she called the office fort. Her desk faced the play area, allowing her to keep an eye on the kids while she worked on app designs. The eldest would often sit beside her with her own toy laptop, working just like Mama. The app development meetings happened during nap time, with Rita often having to mute her microphone to deal with sudden wake-ups or sibling squabbles. Her potential business partners didn't mind. In fact, they saw it as proof that she truly understood their target audience. The app would include features she wished she'd had: feeding trackers for multiples, synchronized nap schedules, and even a sanity saver section with quick meditation exercises. One afternoon, while testing the app's prototype, Rita received an unexpected call from her local multiple birth association. They wanted her to speak at their annual conference, "But I'm just figuring things out as I go," she protested. The organizer laughed warmly. "That's exactly why we want you. You're real, you're relatable, and you're showing other parents it's okay to not have everything perfect." The idea of public speaking terrified her, but Rita thought of Dev. He had always encouraged her to step out of her comfort zone. That evening, while the kids played in their bath, splashing water everywhere as usual, she made her decision. She would do it, not just for herself, but for every parent out there feeling overwhelmed and alone. Preparing for the conference meant practicing her speech during precious naptime hours. The middle child, ever the performer, would often wake up and join her, mimicking her gestures and adding her own toddler commentary. Even the youngest, who still sometimes struggled with words, would clap enthusiastically from his play corner. Mrs. Chen proved invaluable once again, offering to watch the triplets during her speaking engagement. "You're helping other families," she said firmly when Rita tried to protest. "That's worth celebrating." The morning of the conference, Rita found a small care package outside her door, 3 hand-drawn pictures from her kids, with Mrs. Chen's help, and a thermos of her special ginger tea. Standing on that stage, Rita shared her story. The fears, the tears, the triumphs, and the incredible joy of raising triplets alone. She talked about her color coding system that had evolved into an app, about turning her living room into a learning space, about finding strength she never knew she had. When she showed a slide of her yogurt-covered toddlers from that memorable morning, the audience erupted in knowing laughter. The response was overwhelming. Parents lined up to talk to her, sharing their own stories, and thanking her for giving voice to their experiences. One mother of newborn twins was crying. "I've been so scared," she admitted, "but listening to you, I feel like maybe I can do this too." Rita hugged her tight, remembering her own fears from what felt like a lifetime ago. That evening, returning home to find her 3 little ones had waited up for her, despite Mrs. Chen's best efforts to get them to sleep, Rita felt something shift inside her. The eldest immediately showed her a new drawing. The middle one launched into a detailed story about their day, and the youngest simply held onto her leg, smiling up at her with Dev's eyes. As she tucked them back into bed, each with their favorite stuffed animal, and a kiss goodnight, Rita realized they had all grown so much. Not just the children, but her too. From that terrified newly widowed mom to beat, to someone who could stand on a stage and inspire others. The journey had shaped them all. She touched Dev's ring, still hanging around her neck, and whispered, "We're doing okay, aren't we? Actually, we're doing more than okay. We're thriving." 3 candles flickered on 3 separate cakes as Rita watched her triplets, now 3 years old, gather around their birthday table. The journey from that terrifying day in the hospital to this moment felt both like an eternity and a blink of an eye. Her phone buzzed continuously with birthday wishes from their online community, but Rita was too absorbed in the present moment to check it. The eldest, her little artist, had insisted on wearing her paint-stained smock over her party dress, claiming she needed to be ready for creativity. She approached her cake with the same thoughtful concentration she gave to her artwork, carefully planning where to blow out her candle. Her recent paintings covered the fridge, each one signed with a wobbly purple handprint. The middle child, true to form, turned the birthday song into a full performance, complete with dance moves she choreographed herself. She'd been practicing all week, telling anyone who would listen about her big birthday show. Her confidence had grown so much that she now led the singing time at their local playgroup, teaching other toddlers the hand motions to her favorite songs. The youngest, their quiet warrior, stood between his sisters with a smile that could light up the darkest room. His physical therapy days were behind him now, and watching him run and jump with his siblings, no one would ever guess he'd once struggled to take his first steps. He'd developed a special talent for building impressive block towers, often higher than himself. Rita's app, Triple Joy, had launched a month ago and was already helping hundreds of parents navigate life with multiples. The feature she was most proud of was the Village Builder, a section that helped parents connect with local support systems and resources. She'd named it after Mrs. Chen, who still appeared like magic whenever they needed her most. The birthday party itself was a beautiful chaos of laughter, games, and inevitable messes. Their apartment was filled with families from their multiple birth association, each bringing their own special brand of cheerful disorder. Rita had learned to embrace the chaos, setting up activity stations that catered to different ages and energy levels. Between serving cake and managing party games, Rita caught glimpses of moments that made her heart swell. The eldest showing younger kids how to finger paint without making too much mess, though her definition of too much was debatable. The middle one organizing an impromptu talent show in the living room, making sure even the shyest kids got a chance to shine. The youngest quietly helping a smaller child build with blocks, displaying a patience beyond his years. Mrs. Chen arrived with her signature dumplings and a special surprise. She'd found an old video of Dev teaching her how to make them. Rita hadn't seen this footage before, and watching Dev's laughing face as he clumsily folded dumplings brought tears to her eyes. The triplets gathered around the small tablet screen, pointing and giggling at their dad's antics. "He had your smile," Mrs. Chen said softly to the youngest, who beamed in response. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, each with a goodie bag designed by Rita and decorated by the kids, she found herself sitting on the floor of their living room, surrounded by wrapping paper and memories. The app notification showed over 1,000 downloads that day. Parents across the country finding hope and help in the systems she created out of necessity. The triplets, tired but happy, cuddled around her on their favorite reading cushion. The eldest pointed to Dev's guitar on the wall, asking for Daddy's special song. Rita reached up and took it down, something she hadn't done in a while. Her fingers found the familiar chords of the lullaby Dev used to play, and she began to sing softly. The middle child joined in with her own made-up lyrics, while the youngest hummed along in perfect pitch, a gift from his father. The eldest created a gentle rhythm by patting her legs, completing their family orchestra. In that moment, Rita felt Dev's presence stronger than ever, wrapped in the love and joy of their 3 miraculous children. Later that night, after tucking 3 tired but happy children into bed, Rita sat down to write her final blog post about their journey through the first 3 years. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, as she searched for the right words. Finally, she began. 3 years ago, I thought I was facing the impossible. Today, I realize that impossible is just another word for not yet. To my 3 little teachers, thank you for showing me that love multiplies, courage grows, and family is what we make it. And to Dev, we did it, my love. Our 3 miracles are thriving, and so am I. This isn't the end of our story. It's just the beginning of a new chapter.